This is a webinar series from Science Bridge. My name is Magdaleen Cilliers, and today I have a pure pleasure to talk with my friend from Toastmaster Club, Magdaleen Cilliers. She has a PhD in plant biotechnology from University of Pretoria, and currently she's working as a policy and research officer at South African National Seed Organization. Hello, Magdaleen.
Hi, Martina, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really appreciate that you agreed to chat with me, because it sounds to me very interesting, your career path and your transition to where you are now. So can you tell our viewers a bit more about your background, about yourself and your career path?
Yeah, sure. So I think the best place to start is since I was a very small girl, I always wanted to do something in research. I was very interested in research. I liked learning new things. And I actually decided that I want to study zoology. And then somewhere along the line, I actually got exposed to what genetics is and how genetics worked. And I found that very, very interesting. And then I started to change my mind out of the direction of zoology. And I actually read up a bit about genetics. And then I was set on to go and study genetics one day. I also have an uncle which worked at the university as a professor in animal science. And he then exposed me to the a field of biotechnology, which is a lot similar to genetics. And I always explain to people it's just more product orientated than studying pure genetics. So when I started at university, the University of Pretoria, I studied biotechnology, and I actually never changed throughout my studies my degree, because I really enjoyed what I was learning. Although as you all know, a BSc degree, it's the first 3 years, it's quite the same as all the other degrees. So from there on, I then continued to do an honors degree, a master's degree, and then my PhD degree. And I worked specifically on environmental factors of plants and how these genes affect plants. So my master's and PhD was on soybean and how drought affects the natural process of root nodules dying. So as a future prospect, this project could be included to see how one day root nodules can be altered so that they can last longer in a drought season. But as most PhDs are, it was still at the very start of the project. So I did lots of genetic sequencing and things like that. And then when I was done studying, I always knew I didn't want to stay in academia. I never liked article writing. Although I loved being in the lab, I didn't like everything that went with it. So I actually decided many, many years ago that I wanted to go into the industry, and I was not exactly sure how I'll do this. And how it happened is that I actually met my current boss at the general manager of SANSOR at a function that I organized, just a bit of an information day and career day for our department. And then I just tried to ensure that I kept networking with her, although I actually at that stage knew that she will not be able to offer me a job, because that the SANSOR and the South African National Seed Organization is actually a non-profit organization, and it is actually a small organization. But I knew she knew a lot of people. But at the end, she actually hired me as a graduate to see how I would fit into the organization and what I can actually bring to the organization, although there was various plans of what they wanted a new position in the organization to have. And from there on, we then developed the job into a policy and research officer job. So what I do in my job, or just a brief overview, firstly, I'm responsible for research in the seed industry. and I just coordinate the research with the universities, researchers, or even other institutes. And then I also work with policy matters. And why I work with policy matters is because I have a background in genetics and, of course, plant genetics. And the seed industry is a very regulated industry, and there are certain agricultural laws that has to be abided to, and you have to understand how genetics works to be able to work with these laws. So that's how I ended up there. And it's very interesting that although I studied genetics, I am actually more in agriculture now. So I actually made a bit of a leap from just normal biotechnology over to actual agriculture. Although I'm not the person that go and plant the seed, I'm more responsible for the regulation thereof.
So I wanted to go back a bit to your story. So you're saying that your position wasn't there, but because you were networking and you were putting yourself out there, you were able to co-create your position with the current boss.
Yeah, so of course, she had the idea of the position, I think, many, many years ago, as it was lots of things that she was doing. So when I started there, the position wasn't there. But you still have to make sure that organization like that finds the correct candidate. And then from there on, I actually started as more like a project management role, where we started with lots of new projects, example, also capacity building, industry promotion, and things like that. And from there on, I could actually work on my strength and work towards the research and policy role. So this was something that our general manager envisioned many, many years ago, but still she had to first see if I would be able to go into that role. It's also not something that you, especially the policy side, that you learn from university straight off, and you have to like it to be able to do it. So not all people would maybe be interested in something like that.
Of course. So like on your day-to-day basis, are you still visiting labs and doing things related to directly to a wet lab, or you're mainly behind the desk and interacting with people currently on Zoom, on sometimes in person?
Yeah, no, so I don't really get in contact with wet lab research anymore at all. So when I'm talking about research coordination, it's actually like working with the professors and research leaders to make, so we will work with them to create certain proposals for research that we find important in the industry. So just like your PI, when you are studying, they have, most of them have also moved out of the lab. And I think that's an important decision to make is, do you want to move out of the lab into a more senior role, or do you want to stay in wet lab research? Because sometimes it seems to me that, especially in agriculture, there's quite usually a big split. And then, so I work a lot with the universities in creating these proposals. I have to ensure that they stay on path. And other areas where I work a lot with research is I sit on 2 research review panels where we work directly with funding and making sure that the research funds that funding proposals that get submitted are according to the industry needs, and will thereon then make suggestions to the final trusts that has to make decisions on funding and things like that. So I get involved in a lot of research, but I can't say I'm involved in one project where I learn a lot about one project. I learn a lot about 100 projects, but not as in depth as a researcher would have done if they are still in the academia.
So it's a lot of multitasking involved, but also you have quite a bit use of your knowledge to understand actually the project proposals. Without that, you would not be able to.
Yes, definitely.
And how is the interaction with the universities? Because to my understanding, your organization, so South African National Seed Organization, is not-for-profit organization, and it works with the universities and collaboration. There is some kind of collaboration and funding involved in that?
Yes, so when there's a big problem in the seed industry, which doesn't only affect one company, it should be a problem that affects a whole group of the industry. For example, I can use something that there was a specific virus that were affecting brassica growers. So it's not something that affects one company. And this is where we as the South African National Seed Organization will step in, and then we will look at what is the problem. We will then go to universities and approach them to hear if they can work on this project with us. We are very strict on the project outlines due to the fact that we actually just want certain answers and want them to help us with that. Our organization is structured in a way that members pays membership fees to us, and then we of course help them with various things to help them with trade. But then, as we are a non-profit organization, sometimes it happens that there might be a little bit of leftover funding, which will then be moved into a special fund. And from that special fund, we are able to pay for some research. Unfortunately, this is not research of millions of rands. This is only a small amount of research. So SANSOR can usually add a bit of funding to research projects. If it's, of course, very, very important research and we need the data immediately, then companies might also add funding to this. And other than that, we also then still have to apply for external funding, just like any other researchers do at university. So that's how we try and support researchers. And from there on, what we are able to do with other funding that we can apply for is to apply and to pay where possible for bursaries for students doing their postgrad studies on that project. So that also alleviates a bit of the funding, because the bursary funds comes out of a separate fund than the research funds. Yes. So at the end of the year, our organization has no profit, but and that's how we ensure that we can move the funds into a research fund. But at this stage, we do not have a structured research fund where every year this amount of funds goes in there, but hopefully in the future, that is something that we would like to work towards.
No, that sounds great. So you're basically actively supporting students and researchers in your field, which can be a tangible result of the project, which can be translated to industry directly. So I think it's quite a great initiative to create collaboration between industry and university. How do you see it, how is that collaboration going, actually?
Yes, I think we have various projects that started, and some of them have already ended. So this is not a long-term relationship that we have with most universities, because we are working for the industry, and as you know, in industry, time is money. So we need answers quickly. So usually when we're done with a research project, the problem is solved and we work on. However, with universities, and also another project we have, there has to be certain continuous collaboration and maybe building a baseline. Because what we've realized in South Africa, especially in the agricultural field, is that there is a big skills gap. There's lots of people that has lots of skills in research, but they are not doing industry-specific research. So what we are trying to do is see if we can get more a baseline where we can have certain researchers work closely with industry, and for that then help us working on problems as they come in. So a bit more of a proactive approach than a reactive approach, because otherwise the problem will first arise and then we have to solve it. So what we want to work on is a proactive approach, so that there is that capacity at university. So if there's a seed-related issue, we can get there. Currently, we have a big project with the University of Pretoria, where we had to start a new research group due to the fact that there was nobody else in the country that can help us with this. And that was quite a nice initiative to be part of, because we had to actually, to start a research group from scratch is actually a lengthy process, because you don't have capacity for what you're doing. So you have to start at the very bottom with like one student doing things and making it bigger and bigger. And that was a nice way for me also to experience how this starts and how we can make it even greater in a few years. But you have to keep in mind, you have to have the long-term goal in mind of 10 years and not get frustrated. So with that situation, we work with universities on a collaborative approach quite a lot, where industry will also have frequent meetings with them to tell them, this is the direction you have to go and this is what we want. And yes, that was quite a nice project to be part of, as it's still an ongoing project.
So it's kind of like you going back to the university a bit. So
Yeah.
what kind of skills from your education actually are actively helping you with your current position, aside from knowledge?
Yes, now I say the most important skills that you would get from studying postgrad degrees is definitely problem solving. And I think, as most scientists knows, I don't think there's anything that you do that works the first time. Especially for me, I was in the molecular field, and I think even though it worked today, it doesn't work tomorrow, and for no reason. So I think that is one of the main skills that I was able to use, was problem solving, if we talk about soft skills. And definitely also a bit of project management. I think everybody manages their own project and they undersell themselves of how well they actually can do project management when you are doing your degree. And I think that's an important skill that you can then facilitate further when you are actually in the workplace.
Absolutely. Project management, I think people don't realize themselves that what they are doing is projects. So when the job advertisement says that you need to have experience in project management, you actually have it. After 2 years of your master's degree, you have 2 years of certain level of management of your project. And the
Yes.
timeline keeping, the books, the lab books, keeping all of that as your paperwork background, it is management. And you can always advertise that, despite the fact that it was only during your graduate program.
Yes, no, I definitely think so. And I always give the advice to students that you felt that you've studied for various years, and then when you apply for a job, the first thing you write there on your CV is that you have a degree in this. But usually that would be in their job prescription. They would know what they want, so they will only receive CVs that have this degree. So that's not the thing that makes you stand out. The thing what makes you stand out is actually the soft skills and skills that you learned during your studies. And I think everybody learns those things, but they don't realize it. So I think there's a way of restructuring your mind to know that if you work with your bursary holders or even your the grant holders of the research to report back to them, you also build those relationships. And that's something that you have to do in your working life on a daily basis, where you have to report back on what you do and things like that. And that, while you're studying, that just seems like a small task, but if you actually think about it, it's a relationship that you build with a recipient and grant holder relationship. And those are actually the things that is important for you to use when you go into industry, especially in your CV or just in interviews. And people completely forget about all those things and just think about the degree that they studied, although all the other 10 people in the room also studied that degree. So what makes you special from what you learned during your studies is important.
No, absolutely. Your CV has to stand out, because HR managers are receiving hundreds of CVs and they have to somehow sift through all of that.
Yes, no, definitely.
So, Magdaleen, I would like to really thank you for your time today. And can you tell us where people can find you if they want to reach out and get more information about your experience?
Yes, of course. You're welcome to go to the South African National Seed Organization's website, and it's www.sansor.org. And then when you go to the Contact Us page, you will find me there with my email address, and you can contact me on anything for the matter, even if it's just for advice for certain things. I like helping researchers just to give advice if they have questions, or if you're interested in the seed industry, you're welcome to contact me anytime.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll attach this information to the video, to the link below. And thank you again for all your advice. Do you have any final advice for our listeners?
I think there's so many advice to give, but I think the most important advice would be for when you want to make the transition from academia to the industry, is that you have to be sure where in the industry you want to fit in. Because in the industry, you still find research positions, maybe in labs of certain companies, or do you want to move more in a corporate role? And that doesn't mean you have to move out of what you did. Like example, for myself, I'm still in agriculture, but I'm not every day on a tractor, or not on a tractor at all. And I have blonde hair, but I'm still working in agriculture. And I think with various industries, you have to see where you as a person will fit in before you make that jump, because personality and cultural experiences in the job space is actually what makes you happy. So don't just stick with, I am a researcher and I want to do research. There is so much more opportunities where you can use your skills that you have.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. I think it's very important advice for people to actually do their research. If they are researchers, they can do their research on what they want to do and
Yes.
how they're going to fit, because we spend most of our life in our jobs. So exactly as you're saying, you have to be happy about your life and your choices. So do your research so that you don't end up unhappy in a position that you don't fit in.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Magdaleen.
Thank you so much for your time, Martina. I really appreciate it.